Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Haworth, step parent, counselor, and coach. And today we're going to talk about how to protect your money and your mind. With me today is Neil Palache, founder of the Wealth Creator Company for Women. Neil specializes in helping women get control of their finances. And prior to forming this company, Neil spent 20 years as an insurance consultant. Welcome, Neil, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Susan. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, this is exciting because money is a big issue for everyone, right? Mm-hmm. So you had a successful career in the insurance industry. What led you to decide to focus on women in particular?
Right. Yeah. Good question. Yeah, I was in the insurance business and financial advisory business for 25 years, and I hired a coach, which many of us do. At the end of that period of time, I was getting a little bit, what can I do? But I don't, it's not like I was going to become an engineer. I wanted to remain in the financial services business. So I hired a coach. And she said two things to me. Number one, that it would be good to focus on a particular kind of industry, or it would be good to focus on a situation or focus on a gender. Those are the types of discussions we had. In other words, you don't want to be a generalist. You want to be real specific with what it is you're going to do. So, she did a lot of the testing and profiling, and I'm sure you've all been through it. Many of the people in your audience probably have too. And she said, it really is clear to me that you work better with women. So I think we should start there. But that's half the population of the planet. So it's not exactly a niche. And that's how we got into looking at occupations, and in this case, ended up working in the divorce and widowed, single women, that kind of thing. So that's how that happened. It was all with the help of a coach and chatting, talking it through.
Yay, coaches, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, exactly. So let's dig in.
Yeah.
So what is the number one mistake that you see that women make concerning their money?
Well, I'd have to say the number one mistake is not being involved. That would have to be it for me. I see so many people who I meet, and they don't know what's going on. And I understand that sometimes that's not entirely within their control, right? I mean, unfortunately, in marital situations, sometimes there is a controlling party, as it were. And so that information is kept from my clients, usually women, right? But where there can be some involvement, whatever that is, then do it. Like, get involved, see what bills are being paid. Maybe even if you've not really ever been really interested in the monetary side of things, maybe you went to college and you have a degree and you're smart as a tack, but finances weren't your thing. Maybe it was a history degree. Maybe you were going to become a teacher or a lawyer or whatever, but money wasn't your thing. Finances weren't your thing. So maybe go take a couple of classes. Go to the community center, go to the community college, do some online stuff. There's loads and loads of things that you can do to teach yourself what's going on and be in a position to ask questions, right? And find out, see what you can do to find out about, what's going on, so that you're not in the dark. And if anything happens, you're in a situation where you can just kind of pick up and keep it going.
So interesting, Neil. As you were explaining this, I was thinking, well, women in particular sometimes, release the reins of their financial background or whatever their situation. But men can do that too. Men often trust accountants or financial advisors, and they get into trouble too. But you see it, but you see it more with women. Yeah.
Well, my whole situation is completely slanted because I only work with women.
Right.
So yeah, it can. Oh, without question. I mean, look, we hear about people with loads and loads of money
Yeah.
right? Entertainers and sports figures and so forth, and they hire these business managers and they get completely ripped off. We've got people who we know have died, Prince and Michael Jackson and various other stars, and they don't have an estate plan or an up-to-date estate plan. So yeah, I mean, people who have the money to spend on the best advisors, and yet somehow they don't have the proper instruments in place, and they're not paying attention, and they can get really hurt. Either they end up paying taxes through the nose, or somebody rips them off. It's terrible and unnecessary.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So, as you probably know, many of the people listening to this interview, Neil, are stepmothers.
Yeah.
And money in particular is a hot button for stepmoms. And the reason being is that sometimes our resources, our financial resources, are going towards supporting children who are not our own, maybe ex-spouses. And, maybe where we don't approve of how the money is being spent, and indulging kids with lots of stuff and experiences, or it's maybe affecting our lifestyle too. So let's focus for a minute then on stepmoms and what they can do in this kind of situation. So we're not talking about people who are single. We're not talking about widowed people, divorced or widowed. So you're in a situation where your hard-earned resources are going in a direction you're not necessarily approving of. Mm-hmm. Neil, what can we do?
I think this all comes down to an issue of communication. Like, what's the arrangement? And usually the answer is there isn't one, right? So, and it's difficult to broach the subject. It reminds me of the discussion that one might have when talking about a prenuptial agreement. Those are difficult conversations. And you think, well, oh boy, do I really want to have that discussion? Is that really where we want to start this? Because it sounds like you're starting it in a place of distrust. But it's not that at all. It's about being clear about where the boundaries are, right? And so I think it's important to say, hey, look, I don't mind contributing, and I understand that I don't have full control over where every dollar I contribute is going to go, but there needs to be an understanding, a limit on how we're going to do this, because you do have some situations, like let's say there is a completely, I don't want to make it sound so terrible, but a spoiled child. But let's say it's more of an adult situation, like they're 19, 20 or early 20s, and they're still being completely looked after, and they're not out there getting a job or furthering their education or whatever it is, right? And we all know that maybe dad is spoiling them and enabling them and whatever, and yet you're putting your good money in there because you're a career woman and you've got a good salary, or maybe you've got assets and you're contributing in that way and so forth. The only way to do it is to have a very difficult conversation, but hopefully beforehand. I mean, if you can't have it or don't have it beforehand, you're going to have it at some point. But the longer you wait, the longer that's going to be a bit explosive, right? So if you can have that conversation up front and say, hey, I'm willing to contribute, but here are my guidelines, and here are my standards, and here are my limits. That to me would be the best that you can do. Not going to be a fun conversation, I wouldn't imagine, but a necessary one nevertheless.
Yeah, it's true. And I always say it's never too late to have those kinds of hard conversations. I recently met with a colleague who has an adult stepdaughter, and for decades, the stepdaughter's dad, my friend's husband, has been paying the cell phone bill for his adult daughter who is gainfully employed. And she said, it's not that much each month, but over the decades, it's been thousands of dollars, of course.
Right.
And, she gets triggered every month when she sees this bill, which leads me to my next question for you, Neil. So some financial advisors, they recommend that step parents, in particular stepmoms, and dads have separate accounts and have one joint account for shared expenses, so that if let's say the dad is paying for cell phone service for adult kids, that would be in his separate personal account. Maybe child support, maybe spousal support is in a separate account. And then the joint account is for the new couple, the step family. So what is your take on that, Neil? Do you think that's a good idea? Do you think it's, something that it depends, which is the answer to most every question, right?
I think that for the most part, I like the separate account idea. And that often is what I recommend. I mean, a lot of the clients that I work with who are going through divorce, they do ultimately get remarried, right? So and if there's kids, they become stepmoms and dads, and it's a second marriage and so on and so forth. So I will tell them that it would be a very good idea to have an account each and a joint account, because there are certain expenses without question that are joint, and there are certain expenses that are nothing to do with one another. And again, as you mentioned, spousal support and child support are a good example of that. And so, but they're also, maybe assets, right? It's not like you might go buy a house together, but you've got IRAs from a prior career long before you ever met this fellow, and so does he, and so forth. So I think the idea of keeping things separate, and then you've got to do your estate plan around that, right? Because remember, you've each got to have an estate plan redone, right? You can't have the same estate plan that you had when you were married previously. So yeah, I think keeping those things separate, from my perspective, working with women, I want them to do that anyway, because I want them to be protected. And unfortunately, the divorce rate for second marriages is even higher than the divorce rate for first marriages. So yeah. I'm very cognizant of that with my clients. Like, please, if you can, keep that stuff separate. Consider having a prenup, which they often don't do. That's a difficult conversation, but they are willing to do separate accounts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So last month I interviewed a family law attorney, and she was suggesting to stepmoms to check the beneficiaries of insurance policies, right, and investments, and make sure that the new spouse, the stepmom, is on there and not the ex-spouse, because in the fog of divorce, sometimes that gets overlooked. Have you noticed that as well? And is that something that you?
I definitely have, Susan. And in fact, I had a situation, just to take it to a step further. I had a situation with a client many years after I had done my work, and but we stayed in touch. And she called me one day and said, my ex passed, and I come to find out that his life insurance is no longer in existence, let alone who the beneficiary was. And so there was nothing to do. I mean, what do you see in that situation? The divorce decree said that he was to keep life insurance, and he didn't. So now the only thing that you can do is sue the estate for that money. The problem is you're suing your kids. You're not going to do that.
Yeah.
So, right, because he left everything to his kids, which are her kids. So that's the estate. So you're going to sue your kids? No, you're not. So she's out. Like, it's terrible. So the thing that you have to do is not only to check to make sure that you're the beneficiary on the policy. What I recommend is one of two things beyond that. Number one, become, if you can, the owner of the policy. Or number two, become a notified third party when something happens to the policy. And both you would need permission from the owner, which is probably the husband, right? But
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Neil. I just ask a point of clarification. So are you talking about if you are the ex-spouse, then you would be notified of a change. But if you're the current spouse, then you would automatically be notified if there was a change, or not necessarily?
No, so if you've got no, you would not necessarily. Right. So let's say that the fella has life insurance on his life. And so now you're talking about having insurance on him to protect his now second wife. Right. Now, and so there's two situations here. You've got the ex-wife who needs to be protected, and you've got the current wife who needs to be protected. And the ex-wife only needs to be protected usually if there's spousal support, so that if something happens to him, it can continue to be paid. Okay. And then the current wife, right? So a life insurance policy gets purchased, or there's a life insurance policy in effect that the beneficiary gets changed to her in total or in part, because you can split it, right? So you got this $1 million policy, and you say 50% goes to my current wife, or 50% goes to my ex-wife. Let's say that's how it is. But then the fellow is the owner of the policy, right? He's the owner, he's the payer, and he's the insured. And now you're the beneficiary, or one of the beneficiaries. If there's a change, any change to that policy, the beneficiaries are not notified. I don't care who you are, whether you're the current spouse, ex-spouse, whatever, beneficiaries are not notified. So what you can do is you can say, well, I want to be notified. So I'm going to have a piece of paper signed, and he's going to sign it to say that, let's say in this case, my example, the ex-spouse and the spouse are notified if there's a change on that policy, like if a premium is late, or a beneficiary gets changed, or how the bill is paid, or a bank account from which the bill is paid gets changed, any changes like that. So that gets you notified. Now, if you can go one step further, you can actually be the owner or one of the owners. The difference there is that as a notified third party, you're only getting notified. You don't have any control. Like if you were to call the insurance company, they're still not going to tell you anything. But as an owner, if you call the insurance company, or if you want to make a change, you would be able to do that. So it just puts you in a more secure position.
I see. Interesting. Does this also apply for like 401ks?
Well, no, it doesn't. You can get notified, yes, but there can't be any ownership changes in a 401k, because the 401k, being a qualified retirement plan, is for the person who's named, the employee or the owner of the company or whoever it is. So no, you can't do that with a 401k plan or an IRA, other than the notification thing that you could do, but not the ownership piece.
Okay. So, but all of those, you need to check and make sure that if you're the current spouse, that you are on that you're the beneficiary.
Well, yeah, you do. But here's the deal. If you're the beneficiary and you call up the insurance company, you say, I'd like to check to see if I'm still the beneficiary, they won't tell you. It's without that third party notification, or you're on record with the insurance company as being able to be told that information, which that permission needs to be provided by the husband, who's the insured and owner. So you got to set it up that way, and hopefully, he will allow you to do that.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting. There are just so many details to attend to, right?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know that you have a lot of tips that you share with your clients, and one of them is to pay yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you could explain that, what you mean by that, and how does it apply to intact step families, let's say?
Right. So, what happens a lot is, of course, it's a little different when you own your own business, if you're a solopreneur or entrepreneur, whatever the situation is, versus if you're getting a W-2 payroll. But regardless of how you're getting paid, often what happens is you say, well, this is my income, so therefore that's what I'm going to live off of. If you make $100,000 a year, and you're taking home $6,000 a month after tax, you say, well, $6,000 a month, that's my living standard, right? And if you both have income, maybe it's double that or whatever it may be, right? But what happens is that we do things a little backward in our society. We all do it. This is not picking on anybody. It's just the way it is in a sense. But so you have to break the cycle, move outside of your comfort zone, because you're probably going to end up doing things a little differently than all your friends and your family, and they're going to start questioning you and, all this kind of stuff. But if we were all thinking a little differently about our money, what we would say is that if I've got this income, I know that I have to put X amount of money away into, as you mentioned, my 401k, my IRA, savings account, whatever, rainy day fund. I got all these different categories of savings. And then I'm going to live off of what's left. That's the pay yourself first methodology, that I'm going to save first. So if I've got $6,000 of income, if I could start from scratch, I'd say, well, I'm going to put $1,000 a month away because I know I'm going to need a lot of money when I get older. I'm now 30, I'm 40, whatever. So a lot of money, $1,000 a month, which is a fair bit, right? And I'm going to live off of the 5. So now I'm going to go get my housing, get my car, what cell phone I'm going to use, whatever else it is. But 5 is my budget. I've paid myself first, and now 5 is my budget. But we don't do that, do we? We go out, we get our house, our car, our cell phones, our food, whatever, and then we say, oh, okay, well, I got $100 left. I guess I'll put that into savings. We don't pay ourselves first. We pay ourselves last. And if there's nothing left, we don't pay ourselves anything.
Right. More likely, right?
We live off of 100%. So that's what I mean by the pay yourself first strategy. Very difficult to do. And sometimes you got to start over to do it because you're already in the middle of how you set up your life, right?
And the other wrinkle in that is that you might not be on the same page as your partner.
Yeah.
And you may want to save and they may be a spendthrift or vice versa. So that's another conversation, isn't it?
Yeah. That can be difficult. A lot of compromise. Of course, that's what marriage is about, right?
Yeah.
Compromise. Yeah.
So the other thing that you suggest, Neil, is to get a team of advisors. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you could explain that, what you mean by that.
Yeah, the do it all yourself strategy can be very dangerous, right? Because how do you know everything that there is to know? The challenge is that you actually could. I'm not saying you do a good job at it, but if you wanted to do your own will and trust or have an online service help you that has an 800 number, not a person. If you wanted to sell your own real estate, buy your insurance online, like you could do it all yourself if you wanted to. I don't know, you're not going to get very good advice. And unless you do an incredible amount of studying, I'm not quite sure how you would know how to do all of that. So for me, it's important to have that team, to have an accountant who's doing your taxes and giving you some advice on some tax planning, to have an attorney who's doing your trust and your will, and maybe some other things that need to be done throughout the year. To have a great insurance agent. I mean, this day and age, insurance is so complicated. Car insurance, homeowners insurance, renters insurance, life insurance, health insurance. It's incredible how much insurance there is, and most of it is necessary, right? When you sell your house, it's a good idea to use a realtor. They know what they're doing. They're going to get you a better price. People say, well, I've got to pay a commission. True. But typically, you'll see that a realtor will be able to cover that commission because they get you much more money. I mean, at least that's supposed to be their job. So a good one will. Mortgage broker the same way. Like, you've got to make sure that you've got somebody that knows what they're talking about. So developing that team around you. I mean, when I work with my clients, many times they lose their advisors because their advisors were connected to their ex-husband. Mm. You know, it was his college buddy that was the financial man, or whatever it was, right? And so in some cases, the woman says, well, you know, that was my husband's friend, so I lost that. Or I don't want to use that person because I don't have a trusting relationship with my ex, and I don't want the same advisor advising us both. Maybe there would be a conflict. So you develop your own team. I know that's what I do, is to help people to meet those people that they can trust and build their own long-term relationships with. It works.
Yeah. I agree. It's exhausting trying to do everything yourself. I mean,
my goodness.
I feel like I need a coach or an advisor in every aspect of my life, you know.
Yeah. If you've got good people around you who care about you and you have a relationship with them, you know, you're working with them for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I mean, that's phenomenal. You know, I mean, those are people that are, man, they are ingrained in your life. They're part of the landscape, and it really makes a big difference.
Yeah. Great advice, Neil. So what else, what have I neglected to ask you? Good other tips for stepmoms and everyone else that concerning protecting money and their minds too, their emotional well-being.
Yeah, I think that if there were one overriding financial issue that I see, it's debt. Right? That many times you're trying to kind of keep up appearances, or, you know, maybe you want to buy yourself something and you get a little carried away, whatever the situation. And by the way, men and women do this. It's different stuff that they buy, but they both do it. You know, maybe, I don't know, maybe women buy jewelry and men buy cars. I don't know, but there are differences between what men and women will want and spend money on. And it's fine to do. I mean, I'll say to my clients, look, don't take this away from you. It's like saying, I'm never, ever going to eat a donut. Come on. Like, occasionally you can have a donut. You're going to be fine. So to say I'm never, ever going to spend money on myself again, don't do that. Just have
Sounds terrible.
Yeah, of course it is. And so you say, all right, I'm going to set $200 a month away, or whatever your number is that seems affordable and reasonable. And I'm going to give myself permission to spend it, really spend it on stuff that I want, not need, like it, and I can afford it based upon, you know, my income and so on and so forth. But just really work hard to stay away from the credit cards that you can't pay off in full. That's
Yeah.
a slippery slope. You end up getting something, you got 2,000-3,000, you say, okay, I can handle this, but then, there's 25% interest on that. And you're putting $100 a month away against the credit card, but 70 of it is interest.
Yeah.
And that would be the one big thing. And from the mindset perspective, so that's a financial thing that I would say really, really keep an eye on. And then from the mindset thing, my thing is the thought process that there is a solution for every problem. So if you get yourself into a pickle, not saying don't worry about it and, blow it off and ignore it and bury your head. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying, just know that even though you may not know what the solution is at that moment, that there is one, and that somebody will help you with that, especially if you have that team in place. And to pick up the phone to your friend, your advisor, your brother, your mother, or whatever it is, and ask for help. And somebody will come up with something that makes sense. It may take a little while, but do your best not to stress about it, which often will just make it worse.
Yeah.
It's difficult to do, but
Neil, that is such great advice for every aspect of one's life, is that, when you go down the road of feeling hopeless, things get hopeless. So yeah, there are always people out there to help you. You're absolutely right. Beautifully said. So how do people get in touch with you if they want some more of your sage advice?
Well, thank you for that. Well, I am a very available person, so I will say that if you want to call me direct or text me, my phone number is 818-606-7327, and you're welcome to. I pick up my own phone. They're not screened. I don't have a screening service or anything like that, so feel free to reach out. If you want to email me, Neil, Neil, at thewealthcreatorcompany.com. Spell it all out, bit of a mouthful, but Neil at thewealthcreatorcompany.com. And you can go to the website, thewealthcreatorcompany.com, and you can certainly reach out there or sign up for our weekly newsletter, those kind of things. And reach out to me anytime. I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't charge to answer questions. So if you want to call and have a question, I'm happy to help in any way I can.
That's so generous of you. And I have to say, Neil, I have heard nothing but positive things about how you treat people who just call you for information. So very, very generous and gracious of you. And it's been generous and gracious of you to spend this time with me and with those I'm going to share this interview with. So thank you so much, and so appreciate all of the information that you share and what you do for women. Thank you.